Hi, my name's Kevin Hicks. Welcome to the History Squad and to another of our Patreon voted videos. This is great. You imagine being able to go back to the medieval times and you walk into a courtroom and instead of finding a murderer or a thief on trial, you find a pig. A pig that may even be dressed in human clothing, in people clothing. Or you might find there are rats that are actually on trial for eating the crops. Now, to us of the modern age, this might sound a little bit absurd, but all across medieval Europe, there really were animals put on trial. There were judges, lawyers, defense, prosecution. Sentences, they could be fined, they could be actually banished, or in some cases, they could even be executed. These were the same laws that were for people. They are exactly the same for the pig that's been put on trial. So why did they do this? Why was it treated so serious? Because these affairs were quite solemn. Was it superstition? Was it just grappling with justice? Who was responsible for a crime that was committed by an animal? Or were there darker fears there? Don't forget, in these days you could be hanged or burned as a witch. Or was there another thing? Was it just another way of expanding or enforcing the law? Now, animals being put on trial is not confined to the medieval period. Go back to ancient Rome, ancient Greece even, and other parts of the ancient world, animals were put on trial. But it was really from the 13th to the 17th centuries that the practice took hold in Europe, especially in France, Switzerland and parts of Germany. Interestingly, not England, but I'll explain that a little bit later on. Now, animals that could be put on trial: pigs, goats, horses, dogs, rats. But actually, if they were found guilty, they could be hanged or even burned at the stake. How do you hang a horse, for goodness sake? Well, it just so happens I've made a model, but I'll show you that a little bit later on. So for now, let's have a look at some of these individual trials. Our first case is the case of the Falaise sow. 1386, this female pig down in Falaise in Normandy, France, has killed a small child, tore into its face and arms. Now, this kind of attack is not unusual. Pigs were allowed to roam free around the town, snuffling, and if you upset one, it will have a go. But this particular pig, she has been arrested, placed in the cells, she will be fed, and her hay will be changed, because this is actually very serious. She is a criminal and will be treated as such by law. So fed, clothed, all that kind of stuff. The day of the trial, eyewitnesses are summoned. There will be barristers, a jury, the judge, the whole business, because the sow has been charged with homicide, murder. She was found guilty and sentenced to be mutilated and then hanged. But it goes further. She will be fully dressed in human clothing to resemble a human criminal. She will be paraded around the town square. She will then be mutilated. In other words, her face will be sliced open. Her four quarters will be actually sliced. Then she will be hanged. The way they hang them is quite something. But we do know that the hangman was paid 10 sous and 10 deniers for the job, but an extra 10 sous for a new glove, because the pig wouldn't just be hanged, it will actually be garroted as well. It's quite horrible. As I say, I've made a model. Now, once this was all carried out, the whole proceedings was recorded with a fresco painting in a local church, but unfortunately that has since been damaged and destroyed. This is all reflection, isn't it? It's ritual symbolism. The dressing of the pig, the parading of the pig, the guilty party, and the paying of the hangman. It's quite something, because this is all recorded. We know exactly what went on. But there's another one with regards to a pig, and it's a sow and her piglets. Now, our next case takes us down into Burgundy, France, 1457, where a sow has attacked, killed and partially eaten a 5-year-old child. The problem is not just the fact that a child has been killed, the sow has her 6 piglets with her. The sow is charged with homicide, murder, and the piglets are charged with being accomplices to murder. Now, this all takes place in Saulagny-sur-Étang in France. And as I say, the sow is indicted with murder and the piglets as accomplices. But imagine this. They're on trial. There's the pig and the piglets all turn up. It wasn't us. We didn't do a thing. We were just with Mommy when she attacked the little boy. It's farcical to us, isn't it, in the modern age? But in fact, this was very serious. This was the power. The whole proceeding is preserved in Latin transcripts. The sow was actually found guilty of murder, homicide. But there was insufficient evidence against the piglets, so they were acquitted. Oh, thank you. And they were released back to the owner. But then due process takes over. The pig, once again, will be dressed, will be paraded, and will be ritually hanged, just as if it was a human criminal. But what I like about this case is it shows you how seriously they treated the due process of law. The piglets were found not guilty due to lack of evidence, and they were handed back to their owner. We have an interesting case regarding rats. They weren't executed. This took place in the Diocese of Autun in Burgundy, France, where it was the 1520s, and the farmers there had brought charges against the rats for devouring the barley. The farmers had collected the barley, they'd harvest the barley, and the rats were going berserk. They were devouring it. And it all goes to court. There you have the judge, the whole business. But they appointed a juror to defend the rats, Barthélemy de Chasseneuil. That name, famous in the law of France, the history of France. It's quite something, because he reckoned that the whole proceedings was flawed. There was a bit of a technicality. He says you can bring the charges against the rats and they must then appear in front of the court. But the rats all live in different villages, in different locations. So how are you going to summons? So they put the summonses up on all of the church doors and all of the villages all the way around, and they don't turn up. So he says, well, do you blame them? Every crossroads, every village is full of cats and dogs, the mortal enemies of the rats. And if a summons has got to be legal, then the accused must be allowed to come to the court without fear of losing his life. And de Chesnay, he had the case thrown out of court. The rats never had to appear. To me, that is justice. Not even insects were immune to the law. But if you go to 1478, Lausanne in Switzerland, the seed beetles were devastating the crops, and they were formally accused of crop devastation. And there was a full trial. Now, in order to hold a trial, you've got to have a group of the accused. So there should have been a great whole bag of these seed beetles, just like I've got my locusts here in front of the judge and all of that kind of stuff. They were threatened with excommunication if they didn't appear in court. And of course, they didn't appear in court. So they were, they were excommunicated. And as they were not part of the animals in Noah's Ark, they were regarded as the dark ones, the evil ones. It's interesting, isn't it? The church differentiated between different animals. If you look at the raven, one of the devil's creatures. However, the dove, the beautiful white dove, was pure and, of course, must have been godly. So, sticking with the insect theme, we have another case to look into. 1587, Saint-Jean-Maurienne in France. Weevils, not locusts, actually weevils, but I haven't got any weevils, have been devastating the vines. And the proceedings were started, but there was a delay due to the plague, apparently, and the advocate and prosecutor died. So the case was reconvened, and the advocate for the weevils called for the case to be closed. He says, look, These creatures existed in Genesis. They have a right to life. But the case continued and then was delayed through war. So you can imagine this is going on and on. Eventually, the town people were called to the town square by the ringing of the bells, and there was a debate. Because these weevils have a right to life, what should we do? Well, we'll find them a piece of land. And that was debated and agreed. You can imagine this, can't you? All the people trying to agree. So this piece of land just outside of town, the weevils could go and live there. You can go and live there. Oh, thank you very much. The problem was that the land was uninhabitable. There was nothing to eat. And the people agreed that the insects could have it, providing they had full rights of water, minerals, walking over the land. And indeed, if they were under threat of war, they could go and hide on the land. And it's interesting, isn't it? How do you get all these weevils to agree? So the advocate for them had to agree that this was good land and that the insects would be quite happy and would agree to live on that land. Yeah, do you agree? No. Okay, clear off. So, in fact, what this was due process of the law. There was a problem, had to be dealt with legally, and indeed it was dealt with. I doubt if the weevils left the vines and went to live on the land. I reckon they simply learnt to live together. Now, when it comes to horses being put on trial, now that is quite rare because, let's face it, horses are very expensive. In fact, according to the law in Burgundy, if a horse had committed such a heinous crime of killing somebody, the horse will be confiscated to the lord and not executed. However, 1389, Dijon, in France, it's recorded in the municipal register that a horse that had killed a man was in fact condemned to death. Now, as you can see, I've actually made a model about a horse being hanged, but I shall go into that in a moment. Now, execution was meant both as a punishment and a ritual purification of removing a dangerous animal, a blood-stained animal, from the community. But hanging a horse. So I found a copy of an engraving of the execution of a pig, and although there's a noose above the pig's head, the executioner appears to be garroting or strangling it. For a horse, I understand a reinforced gallows was used, so I've put the two of these together for my model. So, they have the gibbet, they have the horse, they have the hangman over there who is pulling with all his might to try and strangle the horse. But I don't know if any of you have ever ridden a horse or been close to a horse or even put your arms around a horse's neck. I have, and they will take some hanging. So my model here shows that the noose from the reinforced gallows is around the horse's neck, and a second noose, which this guy is pulling as hard as he can and basically strangling the horse from another direction. In truth, we don't really know how these creatures, these animals, were executed, dispatched, if you like. Maybe they were beheaded, killed with a sword, but it was all part of the judicial proceedings, the purification, ridding the community of a dangerous animal, but legally. So it's an interesting case where a bull was apparently executed. He was charged and found guilty May 16th, 1499, by the bailiff of the Abbey Beaupère, and he was sentenced for killing a 14 to 15-year-old youth, Lucas de Pont, who was actually tending the horned beasts on the Abbey property when the bull attacked him, get this, with furiosity. It records in the state documents that the beast will be hanged at the gallows where these proceedings normally take place. It's amazing, if you think you got a horse, you might be able to calm him down while you put a halter over him or a noose around him. But a bull that's just killed somebody with furiosity, now that would be a sight to behold. My final case of animals on trial is the most famous case of the Basel rooster, 1474, Switzerland. The rooster was accused of an unnatural crime, laying an egg. It was believed that if the egg actually hatched, it will be a cockatrice or a basilisk, a deadly serpent or dragon. So the cock was duly arrested, along with the egg, and charged before a state court because they considered the egg to be a form of sorcery. He's a witch. So it went through witnesses, the whole palaver, and they were found guilty and condemned to death. But because it was sorcery, they will be burned at the stake, both the rooster and the egg. Or were they lightly roasted or even barbecued? Who knows? So, in medieval Europe, there were two kinds of courts that you could be tried in. There was the secular, the state, or the civil court, as we have today, trying people for murder, theft, or dealing with civil cases like boundary disputes, all that kind of thing. Then you had the ecclesiastical court, the church court. They will deal with church business, but also the business of the supernatural, witchcraft, that kind of thing. Now, the reasoning behind putting an animal on trial comes from the ecclesiastical side, because they believe that animals were seen as part of God's moral order and capable of being corrupted. Now, when these animals were put on trial, it gave the community reassurance that justice was being done. It acted as a deterrent as well. Keep your animals in order or they might be confiscated, executed. And you must understand about the medieval times. People were full of fear. The common people, they couldn't read, they couldn't write, no newspapers or anything like that. And their times were full of fear, plague, famine, demonic possession, lawlessness and war. They thought that animals were capable of being evil. And, of course, it was a great source of public theatre, these parades, the execution. But most of all, it was a major display of the power of the law. As I mentioned earlier, things were different in England. You see, we had a different law. It's called the common law, where responsibility for animals was placed upon the owner. So if your bull gored your neighbour, they didn't put the bull on trial. They had a go at the owner for not containing his animal. You see, the authorities, the secular authorities, didn't recognise animals the same as they did in Europe. In fact, if you go back to Anglo-Saxon England, they had a thing called the weregeld, where if you or your animal damaged next door neighbour's property or injured somebody, you had to pay a fine, weregeld. And in Wales, they got an interesting one. If a neighbour killed your animal, you then had to hang the animal up by its feet, and then they had to cover the whole animal all the way up with wheat, which is fine if it's just the old cockerel, but what if it was a great big dog, or a pig, or a cow, or a horse? But it was designed, the whole business, whether it be Welsh law, common law, or the old Anglo-Saxon weregeld, to put the onus of responsibility for your animals onto the owner, not the animal. So just one more story. 1524, Riga in Latvia. The case of the Virgin Mary statue. You see, the Reformation now was just entering that part of the world where the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church, oh my goodness me, let's not even go there. Now, the people decided to put the statue from the cathedral there on trial for witchcraft. It was a statue of the Virgin Mary. Now, I don't know if you remember that if you're going to put a witch on trial, you can try her by trial by water. You throw the witch, bound of course, into the water. If she sinks, she's innocent. If she floats, she's guilty. Don't you love these medieval trials? So the statue is accused, thrown into the river. Now, this wasn't a legal trial. This is just a show. That statue, of course, was made of wood. There's no way is it going to sink. It floats down the river. It's guilty, witchcraft. So they drag it out of the water, set it on fire, and burn it to ashes. But this was nothing more, in my opinion, than a powerful piece of theatre used by one form of religion over another. Well, I hope you like my props. I've brought all my little friends out again, and I've made myself a new friend, Piggy, here. You know, by the late 16th, 17th century, animal trials were actually in decline. It was a time of enlightenment. Rational and scientific thinking prevailed, and animals were seen more as property, not a moral being. So, if a pig savaged your neighbour's child, you would be held responsible. And in my opinion, that's as it should be. But I've got a question for you. All of these animals put on trial, was it foolish superstition or a case of the state and the church extending its power over the people? Let me know your thoughts, what you think, in the comments. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, like, share and subscribe. And if you'd like to support the channel further, why not have a look at joining our Patreon community? The link is in the description. Now, before I finish, a quick shout out to some of our Patreon members. And as ever, I've got the names written down. Hey guys, thanks a million. Sean Leake, Corey Lewis, a Baron no less, and welcome back to Chris Northrop. Hey guys, thanks a million. Without you, I would not be able to make these videos. Bye for now.